I've said it before. I don't think it's possible to be a fan of a long-running series and love everything equally about it. If you've followed me for a while, you've probably got a pretty good sense about what I like and what I don't like from James Bond movies. Well, today, instead of praising this series once again and focusing on some positive aspect of it, we're going to be taking a look at the less than stellar aspects of it. I'm doing my best to play fair and not call out an entire character or film as a worst thing of the series. Instead, I'll be highlighting scenes, moments, and ideas from the entire run of the series, with one notable exception. I made the choice not to include anything from Casino Royale 1967 on this list because A, I could fill up 3 or 4 lists of this size with items from that film that make no sense, and B, it's a comedy, so things not adding up is part of the package with that film. Well, we're going to be pulling teeth here. So for lack of a better descriptive word, here are my top picks for the worst things from the James Bond series. I had 30 or 40 items I could have included on here, but I don't want to revel in being negative for longer than I have to. So I thought I'd go through the first 5 on this list in rapid fire style and briefly talk about why I hate them. First up, Stacey Sutton getting snuck on by a blimp. I almost went with the ear-piercing screaming she does throughout, but I can accept that a person would just naturally scream at a lot of these moments. What I can't accept is that Stacey somehow doesn't hear a blimp come up from behind her and she gets captured. This is the kind of dumb obliviousness that takes me right out of a movie. Next up is Bond and Madeleine's relationship in Spectre. Saying I love you and Bond's retirement at the end of the film to run away with her is really pushing it. Madeleine isn't a terrible character to me on paper, but she and James have not done the legwork within this film to make me buy that he would do that for her. In my opinion, No Time to Die improves on this relationship, but that film is hindered to an extent by having this foundation to work off of. Third is James becoming Japanese in You Only Live Twice. Beyond it not being convincing to a single audience member, 2 guys come into the ninja school to try and kill Bond after he has the makeup on, so it relegates the disguise into being pointless. Fourth is Wei Lin getting captured twice in the finale to Tomorrow Never Dies. This is not so much stupid because it's not believable, but more so that it heavily damages Wei Lin's credibility as a match for Bond. If she is just as capable as he is, if we're breaking the traditional Bond girl stereotype, why does she need to be rescued by him twice within the same sequence? My number 11, the one that just narrowly missed out from being in the top 10, is Bond riding the gondola through Venice. Never mind how out of place and ridiculous a concept it is for a spy, and numerous gobsmacked reactions here, but the friggin' musical choice drives me up the wall. As you'll see on this list, John Barry, despite him being my favorite composer for this series, has an unfortunate track record of ruining scenes with his choices of sound effects and music. And this is the one that irks me the least, because the others are good to great scenes that were ruined. The gondola going on land is an idea that I would have killed off at the script writing stage because I don't think there's a way to do it that would convince me it's a good move.
I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time.
I'm putting Bond's death from No Time to Die relatively low because, if I'm being honest with myself, there are other things from this series that irk me far more. As I detailed in my No Time to Die review, I have no problem killing off Daniel Craig's version of the character, and I even like some aspects of the death, such as it being framed as a self-sacrifice and the remembrance being a solemn private moment between his colleagues versus a national day of mourning. But it's a pretty contrived scenario to kill him off, what with the eternal nanobots, and I put eternal in quotes here. I hate that it's a lackluster villain like Safin that gets the honor of sealing Bond's fate, and most importantly, I hate how he's boxed into such a corner that he has to die. No matter how you slice it, he can't escape the missiles in time, or avoid bleeding out, or have a future with his family, and I hate that. If Bond has to die, let him actually make a noble sacrifice of his own accord, because he feels it's the right thing to do. Don't take his agency out of play here. Even though I make a pretty clear distinction between the rules at play about Bond's mortality in the first 20 official films versus the Craig era, this is still an unsuitable way for this version of Bond to go out. And heaven forbid if Bond is ever killed off again in any future story, I hope the creators will learn from what went wrong here.
Mayday, where have you been? I've been waiting for you. To take care of me personally.
Roger Moore has done a lot of good for this series, and whether he's your favorite Bond or not, he deserves a great send-off. In my opinion, A View to a Kill is not it. I know some are far more forgiving about this film than I am, and enjoy it for what it is, but most everyone seems to agree that Roger stayed longer than he should. I wouldn't mind his age and wrinkled appearance quite as much if the film itself wasn't constantly drawing my attention to it. The obvious stunt doubles, aging up the men appropriately to work with Bond while the women stay in the perpetual peak physical beauty stage, Bond's wardrobe being a bit baggier to hide that physique, and so on. Look, if you want me to enjoy a movie about a wish fulfillment male secret agent, fine. But you cannot pretend that your leading actor isn't 57 and isn't starting to slow down. You got away with it in Octopussy because I felt the action scenes on the whole were quite a bit better. You had a leading lady who didn't necessarily match Bond in age, but who felt more mature and composed and was a good match for him, and the film didn't feel like it was going out of its way to hide Roger's age. This is just something I have a hard time ignoring when watching the film, and it puts me in an awkward state almost from the get-go.
Good. Let the sport commence.
Isn't it ironic that after praising Octopussy, the next item comes from that film? Bond being the center of a safari hunt should be a slam dunk, right? Lots of danger and inherent suspense with Bond having to rely on his wits to sneak around and survive. But Octopussy's offering is nothing like this. It's played more for laughs than anything, and most of those moments fall flat on their face. I'm thinking of things like the Tarzan yell and the tiger moment. There's also no real tension whenever an animal comes in because only Bond faces it. The villains never have to deal with a rogue crocodile, leeches, or snakes. So it feels like these are just there to give Bond a hard time and the villains get a pass. I'm all for finding a way to mix in laughs with the danger element. Other Roger Moore films like The Spy Who Loved Me do this very well. But for underserving a fantastic idea and for being the dud in the otherwise great group of action scenes in the film, this has always made me cringe, and I dread viewing it again on repeat watches. Since I picked a few moments where the audio is the problem, that should tell you how important I feel it is to a viewing experience. Bond has had a rich history with ski sequences, but the weakest in my mind is A View to a Kill's opening. Willy Bogner found a great way to make the skiing feel different from his other efforts, the progression of going from skis to snowmobile to snowboard all on rougher terrain. Yet this entire sequence is ruined for me when a cover of the Beach Boys starts playing, making it clear that we're supposed to be laughing here. It's a low-effort kind of joke that ruins the fun. It feels like after having a nice dinner, the hostess comes by and farts in my face for dessert. I have a hard time believing nobody pushed back against this idea during post-production, and if they didn't, I want whatever they were smoking. Never Say Never Again had a fairly easy job grabbing the public's attention. The return of the original James Bond actor, the legendary Sean Connery. So you'd think his entrance into the film should be treated with a lot of care and that the filmmakers would take advantage of this unique opportunity, right? Doing a training sequence and then having him stabbed at the end is a neat idea, and there's a built-in excuse with this setup to hold off with the reveal of Sean's face until you're ready. However, the scene is spoiled by doing a love ballad with Lonnie Hall. Instead of a nice, tense atmosphere accompanying a scene that shows off how Sean still has the moves to compete with the other Bond actors, you instead get something that feels like it was meant to be the tie-in song to an 80s romantic drama, which undermines any of the fun we could have had with the scene. When even some of the film's writers have come out and denounced this design choice, you know something went wrong. And the opening of a film is one of the most important things to get right. You only get one shot to tell your audience what kind of film this is going to be when they sit down to watch it. And if you don't succeed, you'll be fighting against yourself for the rest of the movie to win them back over.
I might have guessed.
Do you know him?
Not socially. His name's Jaws. He kills people.
If I'm not careful, the majority of this list would have been coming from 3 or 4 films. But to make it a little more interesting and allow for some variety, I've decided to limit Moonraker to just one entry in the top 10. Of all the things in the film, it's what they did to Jaws that bugs me the most. Not making him a good guy so much, but the increase in slapstick with him. Jaws had comedic bits in Spy, but they were better spread out and balanced well with the more serious moments. In Moonraker, I feel like we only get 1 or 2 standout bits, and most of what I remember from him is exaggerated faces and giving him a love-at-first-sight diminutive girlfriend. I once did a melodrama in high school where I played a bad guy named Snidely Dastardly. The director and I got along very well during that show, and so she decided to give the character a happy ending, which I wasn't a fan of. The show was about making fun of stereotypes in Western stories, and not letting the bad guy get his deserved comeuppance was out of step with the whole piece. Moonraker is already pushing the silliness of a Bond adventure pretty far anyways, but this misses the point of what made Jaws fun in the first place, and reeks of a desperate attempt to give kids an out for liking a bad guy. Great work, guys. Now I have to live with the depiction of one of the best and most iconic bad guys in film history, and you turn him into a joke. Thanks a lot.
I sure am, boy. Ever heard of Evel Knievel?
This one is rather simple. The barrel roll from the man with the golden gun is a thing of beauty. It's awe-inspiring. It's the standout stunt of the film. It's up to the level of quality of many of the other great stunts from the series that make my jaw drop. But then I immediately sink to low depths because of John Barry's stupid slide whistle. Why, oh why, in a film that's already more cartoony than it should be, would you go and do something like this to ruin the moment for a cheap laugh? And how did this get past the viewing committee to go to the cinemas? Curse this stupid sound effect for crapping over a glorious moment.
Who sent you?
Your mama. And she told me to tell you she's really disappointed in you.
Sometimes it can be cheesy fun to watch something that's clearly from a particular era and laugh a bit at its absurdity. I know people have that with things like the first 90s Mortal Kombat film and the live-action Scooby-Doo duology. But every once in a while, you see something that makes you so glad we've left that time behind. Case in point, some of Jinx's lines from Die Another Day elicit embarrassment from me whenever I watch the film. But none more so than the "your mama" line. It's so juvenile and stupid. It makes Jinx look pathetic. This is the kind of insult my friends and I would say to each other in 3rd grade. And by 5th grade, we'd die of shame that we ever thought this was a good retort. I know Bond girls aren't the most well-written of female characters. A lot of them are there primarily to be sex symbols and make the film look good, and don't let me stop you from doing that. But have a little dignity, for heaven's sake. Don't give them lines that undercut them like this. Yep, I'm complaining about this scene, and wouldn't you know it, it's the 2nd time Bond surfing has come up here. The windsurfing scene from Die Another Day is a prime monstrous example of how the 1990s got really excited about the visual spectacle of CGI and threw away any pretense of story, character, or realism that got in its way. And this is from 2002. Bond does death-defying stunts all the time, but most of the others are grounded in some reality or are shot with real people and real environments so as to add to both the wow and danger factors. There is nothing good-looking, clever, or tangible about this scene. And with the over-the-top Bond theme playing, it's a pathetic attempt to get your adrenaline pumping. When my wife saw this scene for the first time, she turned to me and said nothing. The silence carried all the required weighted judgment from someone who still had their head on straight. I think the creators must have been snorting something fierce if they thought this was acceptable.
Me. It was all me, James. It's always been me, the author of all your pain.
Honestly, I feel disgusted that Spectre went with this idea. Blofeld is the Moriarty of this series. He's not in all the films, but he casts the biggest shadow on our hero because he was the head of a global criminal organization that sometimes did his own dirty work. He showed up in multiple films, and he arguably had the most personal impact on Bond's life of any villain. James and he already had enough going on to make them interesting. But obviously, with Craig's incarnation being a separate, distinct reboot, we couldn't just rely on the past to solidify Blofeld's menace, so a new motive had to be concocted. I'll say it, this was a stupid idea and reeks of manufactured drama. Remember how some people pitched a fit when the Joker killed Batman's parents in Tim Burton's original film? My issue with that is, while the idea works within the film's story, it betrays a lack of understanding about what made Joker and Batman's relationship fascinating in the comics, and is ultimately less interesting. This goes one further, because not only is it a really contrived way to make Blofeld the central threat of James's life, but they don't even sell us on the idea that the two were once brothers. There's no real sense of familiarity between them, no hint at Bond feeling betrayed by Franz, and nothing to suggest that Blofeld is making any of his schemes target James specifically, or is playing on his inside knowledge of the man. All the deaths in Bond's life had nothing to do with Blofeld, except in a tangential way. And I don't see how each was meant to build on top of each other to suggest the idea that James ruins every life he comes across. Without this point, I still wouldn't be a big fan of Spectre, mostly because I think it's a very bland and uninteresting adventure. But this destroys most of the goodwill I had towards the film. No other moment on this list ruins an entire film for me quite like this does. And that's why I think it's the worst thing in a Bond film. I'm sure I'm going to get some pushback on this list, but I never expected anyone to agree with me. If I had to guess, I'm going to venture a lot of folks feel I'm not being harsh enough on Bond's death, or are going to bring up their negative opinion of Craig as a whole, and are going to be far more forgiving about Moonraker or A View to a Kill. I was a little surprised that nothing from Diamonds Are Forever showed up here, given its status within the fandom, and that many people I know cite things from that film as some of their least favorites. But the only moment I could think of that would have been a contender was Blofeld in Drag. It's too short to be that bad to me, and the ones I covered were just far more deserving of a spot on this list in my mind. Well, you know the saying, misery loves company, so lay out your least favorite moments of the series in the comments. I really am a hopeful, optimistic guy, and I'm looking forward to the next era of Bond on screen, even though I am well aware we might be heading into shark-infested waters with Amazon at the head. Let's just hope some of the items on this list remain as being the pinnacle of terrible Bond material and that the worst is behind us.